Story 1. The Woman in White. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, Martin and Eleanor Harper lived with their two children, 6-year-old Jessica and 3-year-old Ethan. Their home was a cozy, 2-story haven filled with the warmth of family life, but beneath the surface, an unsettling mystery was beginning to unfold. Jessica, a bright and imaginative girl, had always found solace in her art. Her room was a kaleidoscope of colors, with stacks of construction paper, markers, and crayons spilling out of a well-loved Crayola backpack. She could spend hours lost in her creations, drawing whimsical scenes of her family, her dog Rusty, or fantastical creatures from her vivid imagination. One chilly autumn evening, as the golden hues of sunset faded into twilight, Martin was tidying Jessica's room when he stumbled upon a drawing tucked beneath a pile of her artwork. It depicted a young girl, clearly Jessica, with her signature pigtails holding hands with a woman. The woman was not Eleanor, who had striking blonde hair, but a brunette with piercing blue eyes and a small, distinct mole above her lip. The figure was dressed in a flowing white gown, her expression serene yet haunting. Martin's brow furrowed as he studied the image. It was unlike Jessica's usual cheerful drawings. There was something almost otherworldly about it. Curious, Martin called Jessica into the room. "Sweetheart, who's this woman in your drawing?" he asked gently, holding up the paper. Jessica's eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and secrecy. "That's Lucia," she replied matter-of-factly. "She visits me sometimes when I'm drawing." Martin chuckled, assuming it was the product of her active imagination. "Lucia, huh? What's her last name?" he teased. Jessica shrugged. "Just Lucia. She's nice. She talks to me about the stars and the moon." The explanation seemed innocent enough, but something about the name Lucia sent a shiver down Martin's spine. He couldn't place why it felt familiar, but he brushed it off and tucked the drawing away. That night, as he showed the picture to Eleanor, he mentioned Jessica's imaginary friend. Eleanor's face paled, her hands trembling as she gripped the paper. "Lucia?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Martin nodded, confused by her reaction. "Jess said her name is Lucia. Why? What's wrong?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she explained. Lucia was her older sister, who had died in a tragic car accident nearly a decade ago, long before Jessica or Ethan were born. Lucia had been a vibrant woman with brunette hair, blue eyes, and a small mole above her lip. She had been buried in a white dress, chosen by her family to symbolize her purity and grace. The coincidence was too eerie to ignore. Neither Martin nor Eleanor had ever spoken of Lucia to their children, and there were no photographs of her in the house. How could Jessica know her name, let alone her appearance? Determined to understand, the couple sat Jessica down the next day. "Honey, tell us more about Lucia," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Jessica tilted her head, twirling a crayon in her fingers. "She comes at night when the house is quiet. She sits by my bed and tells me stories. She says she watches over me." Martin exchanged a glance with Eleanor, his heart pounding. "Does she scare you?" he asked. Jessica shook her head. "No, she's my friend. She asked me to draw her so you'd know she's here." The couple's unease grew. They began leaving Jessica's door ajar at night, listening for any signs of disturbance. A few nights later, as they sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, they heard soft giggles and murmurs coming from Jessica's room. Heart racing, Martin crept upstairs, Eleanor close behind. They paused outside the door, straining to hear. Jessica's voice was clear, but there were long pauses, as if she were responding to someone they couldn't hear. "Yes, I drew you again," she said. "They want to see you better this time." Martin pushed the door open, and Jessica looked up from her drawing, unfazed. "Hi, Daddy," she said cheerfully. "Is Lucia here?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. Jessica pointed to the corner of the room. "She's right there." Martin and Eleanor stared at the empty corner, but a chill enveloped them, as if the air itself had thickened. The room felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. Eleanor knelt beside Jessica. "Can you draw Lucia again, sweetheart? Every detail you see." Jessica nodded and set to work. The next morning, she presented her new drawing, It was unmistakably Lucia, down to the mole, the blue eyes and the white dress. But this time, there was something new, a faint, shimmering outline around her, like a halo. Martin and Eleanor were shaken to their core. They contacted a local priest who agreed to bless the house. As he performed the ritual, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers, Jessica watched curiously. "Is Lucia leaving?" she asked. The priest smiled kindly. "We're just making sure everyone is at peace." Since the blessing, Jessica hasn't mentioned Lucia again, and her drawings have returned to their usual cheerful themes. But Martin and Eleanor can't shake the feeling that something lingers in their home, watching over their daughter with eyes they cannot see. Story 2. The House in Flames. In the bustling city of Oakwood, Ms. Clara Thompson was a beloved third-grade art teacher at Lincoln Elementary. Known for her warmth and creativity, she had a knack for drawing out the imaginations of her students. Twice a year, she held a special activity called Draw and Tell, where her students would create artwork depicting something meaningful to them and share the story behind it. The classroom would come alive with colorful drawings of families, pets, and dream vacations, each accompanied by a heartfelt tale. One crisp spring morning, as the third graders busied themselves with their drawings, Clara noticed a boy named Tommy sitting alone at his table. Unlike his classmates who were sketching vibrant scenes, Tommy was furiously coloring his paper with shades of red, orange, and yellow. The other children at his table whispered and giggled, casting sidelong glances at his work. Clara approached, her curiosity piqued. "Tommy, what are you drawing?" she asked, peering at the chaotic swirls of color. "It's fire," Tommy replied without looking up, his small hands gripping the crayons tightly. Clara frowned. "Fire? Why fire, sweetheart? This is supposed to be something special to you." Tommy's eyes flickered with a mix of defiance and fear. "I'm not done yet," he said curtly. Sensing his discomfort, Clara decided to give him space, but she kept an eye on him as she circled the room. As the class neared the end of the session, Clara returned to Tommy's table. His drawing had evolved into something far more disturbing, a house engulfed in flames, with jagged black lines representing smoke billowing into the sky. The image was raw, almost visceral, and it sent a chill through Clara. She knelt beside him, keeping her voice calm. "Tommy, this is a very powerful drawing. Can you tell me about it?" Tommy hesitated, his fingers tracing the edges of the paper. "It's my house," he said quietly, "the one my parents tried to burn down with me inside." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air, heavy and unthinkable. She searched his face for signs of exaggeration, but his expression was solemn, his eyes distant. "Tommy, that's a very serious thing to say," she said carefully. "Can you come with me for a moment?" She led him into the hallway, clutching the drawing tightly. "Tell me more about this house," she urged. Tommy's voice was barely above a whisper. "Last summer, I heard them arguing. They thought I was asleep. They said they didn't want me anymore. Then I smelled smoke, and my room got hot. I climbed out the window and ran to the neighbor's house. The fire trucks came, and everyone said it was an accident, but I know it wasn't." Clara's heart ached as she listened. She didn't know what to believe, but the fear in Tommy's voice was undeniable. She thanked him for sharing and sent him back to class, promising they'd talk more later. Back at her desk, she fought back tears, the drawing burning a hole in her mind. She decided to cancel the tell portion of the activity, announcing that the students would take their drawings home instead. The class groaned, but Clara couldn't bear the thought of Tommy's story being shared in front of his peers. That afternoon, Clara met with the school counselor and principal, presenting Tommy's drawing and recounting his story. They agreed to contact social services, who launched an investigation into Tommy's home life. Over the next few weeks, Clara kept a close watch on Tommy, noting his quiet demeanor and the way he flinched at sudden noises. The investigation revealed troubling details. Tommy's parents were struggling with financial ruin and had a history of volatile arguments. While there was no definitive evidence of arson, the fire department's report noted inconsistencies in the cause of the blaze. Tommy was placed in foster care, and Clara made it a point to check in with him regularly. He continued to draw, but his artwork gradually shifted from flames to softer images. fields of green, blue skies, and a small boy standing alone, searching for a place to call home. Clara kept his original drawing locked in her desk, a haunting reminder of the stories children carry in their hearts, waiting for someone to listen. Story 3. The Monster in the Closet. Brad and Jane Peterson lived in a quaint, ivy-covered cottage in the small town of Maplewood, where their 5-year-old daughter, Molly, was the light of their lives. Molly was a quiet, gentle child with a shy smile and a love for drawing. Her room was adorned with her artwork, pictures of flowers, rainbows, and her favorite stuffed bunny. But one summer night, the tranquility of their home was shattered by a fear that refused to let go. It began when Molly tiptoed into her parents' bedroom, her eyes wide with terror. "There's something in my closet," she whispered, clutching her bunny tightly. Brad, bleary-eyed but reassuring, took her hand and led her back to her room. He opened the closet door, revealing nothing but neatly hung clothes and a few toys. "See, sweetheart? No monsters here," he said, ruffling her hair. Molly nodded but didn't seem convinced. The next night she returned, her voice trembling. "The monster's back." This time Jane joined Brad, and they let Molly sleep between them, her small body curled against theirs. The following morning, Molly presented them with a drawing she'd made at breakfast. It was a crude but chilling image, a tall, shadowy figure with jagged claws and glowing red eyes, lurking in what was unmistakably her closet. Brad forced a laugh, trying to ease the tension. "That's quite a monster, kiddo. But it's just your imagination, okay?" But the incidents continued. Molly's fear grew, and her drawings became more detailed, each one featuring the same menacing figure. One night, Brad and Jane were jolted awake by Molly's screams. They raced to her room, where she stood trembling, her shirt lifted to reveal 2 angry red scratch marks across her back. "The monster did it!" she sobbed. Jane's hands shook as she examined the wounds, which were too deep to be self-inflicted. Brad tore through the house, checking every door and window, but found no signs of an intruder. Desperate for answers, they took Molly to a pediatrician who suggested the scratches could have been caused by a sharp object or even stress-induced scratching, but Molly's story never wavered. The monster was real, and it was after her. Brad and Jane rearranged her room, moving her bed away from the closet and installing a nightlight. They even considered moving, but the idea of uprooting their lives felt overwhelming. One evening, as Jane tucked Molly into bed, she noticed a new drawing on the nightstand. This one showed the monster holding a small, terrified girl, clearly Molly in its claws. The image sent a chill through Jane, and she began to wonder if something darker was at play. She contacted a local paranormal investigator who suggested the house might be harboring a malevolent presence. The investigator conducted a cleansing ritual, burning sage and reciting protective chants. Molly watched, clutching her bunny, as the investigator sealed the closet with a sigil. The scratches stopped, and Molly's drawings gradually returned to their innocent themes. But Brad and Jane never fully relaxed. Late at night, they'd sometimes hear faint creaks from the closet, as if something was still waiting, biding its time. They moved Molly to a new room, but the old one remained locked, a silent reminder of the terror that had once gripped their daughter's heart. Story 4. The Taking Man. In the sleepy town of Cedar Hollow, Giovanna Martinez shared a cozy home with her parents and her 7-year-old brother Leo. Leo was a whirlwind of energy, always sketching wild adventures with his crayons and markers. Giovanna, a college student, let him use her desk to draw, and his artwork often littered the surface. Pictures of superheroes, dinosaurs, and their family. But one morning, Giovanna found a drawing that stopped her cold. It was a seemingly innocent family portrait, their parents, Giovanna, and Leo, all smiling under a bright sun. But in the corner, tucked away like an afterthought, was a dark, faceless figure labeled the Taking Man. The figure sat on a swing, holding what looked like a window or a trapdoor in the ground. Giovanna's first thought was that Leo had been watching too many scary movies, but the swing puzzled her. Their family didn't own a swing set, and Leo had never mentioned wanting one. She left the drawing on her desk, assuming Leo had meant for her to see it. Over the next few days, she couldn't shake the unease it stirred. One evening, as she washed her face in the bathroom across from Leo's room, she heard him giggling and talking. Assuming he was playing with his toys, she dried her face and peeked into his room. The door was slightly ajar, and she froze when she saw Leo lying on the floor, whispering to something under his bed. "Leo, who are you talking to?" she called, pushing the door open. Leo scrambled onto his bed, his eyes darting to the TV, which was off. "Nobody. Content," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Giovanna's heart raced, but she didn't press him. The next morning, Leo shuffled into the kitchen holding an empty glass, asking for chocolate milk. Giovanna obliged, filling the glass and grabbing snacks for herself. When she returned to Leo's room, she found him fast asleep, his covers tangled around him. Confused, she woke him and handed him the glass. "I didn't ask for this," he insisted, his brow furrowed. That night, Giovanna was jolted awake at 4 a.m. by the sound of Leo's voice. She crept to his room and peered inside. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking animatedly. "You brought it back," he said, his voice filled with delight. Then a shadow moved in the corner, a shapeless, inky blackness that seemed to pulse with intent. Giovanna's breath caught, and the world spun. The next thing she knew, she was waking up in her own bed, the morning sun streaming through her window. When she confronted Leo, he claimed no memory of the night before. Desperate for answers, Giovanna showed the drawing to her parents and recounted what she'd seen. They sat Leo down, and after some coaxing, he opened up. "The taking man is my friend," he said, his voice small but certain. "He takes things like my toys or my crayons and brings them back. He gave me red berries once. I think they're cranberries. He lives under the bed and comes through the window in the ground." Giovanna's blood ran cold. There was no window or trap door in their yard, and the idea of Leo eating unknown berries was terrifying. Her parents searched the house, finding nothing out of place. But they installed a lock on Leo's window and began checking under his bed nightly. They also took him to a child psychologist who suggested the taking man was a coping mechanism for stress, perhaps related to school or family dynamics. But Giovanna wasn't convinced. She began researching local legends and found whispers of a figure called the borrower, a spirit said to lure children with gifts before taking something far more precious. The stories were vague, but they matched Leo's description too closely for comfort. One night, she sat outside Leo's door, listening for any sign of the taking man. Around midnight, she heard a soft tapping, like fingers on glass. She burst into the room, but Leo was asleep and the window was locked. Leo hasn't mentioned the taking man since, and his drawings now focus on happier themes. But Giovanna keeps the original drawing in a locked drawer, unable to throw it away. Sometimes when the house is quiet, she swears she hears faint giggles or the creak of a swing that doesn't exist, echoing from the shadows of her brother's room.